Maybe you can't hear that over the fan, but that was thunder. It's storming outside, and I am here to make my second video. God, I hope you can hear that. It's very loud thunder. It's shaking the house. My second video on Madonna. This is going to be a review of her 1990 compilation. Or, God, I gotta start over! Anyhow, I'm just gonna jump right into it.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Alright, I had to move the camera. I keep thinking I have the album in the shot, and then I go to edit, and it's not in the shot, so that's frustrating for me. So hopefully it's in the shot this time. Okay, the Immaculate Collection was released back in 1990. This album came out only 6 months after her soundtrack album, I'm Breathless, was released, which would have been May of that same year. Madonna was also touring at the time, her Blonde Ambition tour, probably her most famous world tour ever. And it wasn't long before I'm Breathless that the Like a Prayer album had come out. That came out in March of '89, so Madonna was just like releasing the albums left and right here, and they all were spawning hits. Justify My Love, the first single, was the first #1 on the Hot 100 for 1991. It's also Madonna's only #1 single off of a Greatest Hits album. The second single didn't do that bad either. Rescue Me is a top 10 hit. At the time, it was also the highest debuting single for a female artist. Since that time, that title's been taken, but the song debuted at number 15 and then had a very short ascent to number 9. I think number 9 is where it peaked. This album also has the honor of being the highest selling Greatest Hits compilation by a solo artist. So a lot of critics put it right up there with ABBA Gold as far as like Greatest Hits compilations go. I agree. I think this is her best Greatest Hits compilation, and I'm going to tell you why. A Greatest Hits compilation is kind of a hard sell, especially in today's world where you can just go on iTunes and buy all the tracks you like and make your own Greatest Hits compilation. But even back then, before you had iTunes, I wasn't a huge fan of Greatest Hits compilations because I'm that guy that likes to listen to an album front to back, kind of as an experience. I like it to just be cohesive and kind of work as a whole piece. That's my thing. And what was so cool about Immaculate Collection is that it actually accomplished this. And against really crazy odds. For example, the tracks are listed in chronological order. So, as far as like sequencing goes, there was really no flexibility for them to kind of rearrange how the tracks fell to make them flow better. They're literally in chronological order of how Madonna released the singles. And despite that, the album has a great flow. You don't feel like you need to skip through tracks. Another great thing about this album is Shep Pettibone came on board to remix all of the back catalog songs. So 15 of the 17 tracks he kind of retouched. They were given new edits. Tracks like a Prayer and Express Yourself were completely remixed. They were given the Q sound treatment. Don't ask me what that means because I don't really know. I just know that it was the first album to use it, and I don't even know that any other albums ever used it. The album sounds great. It's a little dated today. It needs to be remastered, but other than sounding a bit quiet compared to newer releases, it's awesome. So yeah, so you're listening to this album and you feel like you're listening to a brand new Madonna album. The songs felt fresh and new. The older tracks on side 1 felt just as new as the tracks on side 2. It's just really clever how that was done. And also she had like 4 albums and some soundtrack hits before this came out. So there was a lot of singles to work with, and she could have just dumped them all on here, and instead she was kind of selective. And in a curious way, number one hits like "Who's That Girl" were excluded, um, while songs like "Into the Groove," which wasn't even released in the U.S., were included. That was kind of contentious for some people, but at the end of the day, you have a album that's really strong, and actually is on a number of critics' best album lists, which is kind of rare for a greatest hits album. Uh, Rolling Stones a while back did a top 500 albums of all time. This was in the top half of that list at number 186. Blender magazine did 100 greatest albums of all time, and maybe this makes them less reputable, but they put this album at number one. That's a bit high, I think. It's a great album, but uh, so because of this, I was actually really excited for Madonna's future greatest hits compilations. I thought, oh my God, she put so much into them. It's like a whole new album. I mean, she did a photo shoot with Herb Ritts for this album. New photo shoot, new pictures of her. The album art, I forget who did that album art, but it's also really cool. I love the title, the kind of play on words with Immaculate Conception, because Madonna does love to reference Catholicism, both in her lyrics and in her performances. Then you move on. So she had a ballad compilation in the mid 90s, and we're just going to skip over that like it didn't happen here and jump to her 2001 compilation, which was just so starkly different from this one. That one also came on the heels of a tour, her Drowned World tour. She didn't put a lot of thought into naming the album. There was a few ideas that were bouncing around, and she ultimately went with GHV2, which I hate. And she admitted that it was out of laziness that she went with that. The 90s is like my favorite Madonna period. This is when she kind of was the queen of the maxi single. I loved buying every single one of those singles for the remixes that you were going to get. Her music videos in the 90s, they were all just so cool. I wasn't a huge fan of all the how ballad heavy it was in the middle of it all, but I mean, I adored Erotica and Ray of Light, and even the slower tracks like Secret and Human Nature. She was putting out these really awesome remixes. Yeah, so I was really looking forward to her next compilation, and it's awful. So it's not in chronological order on GHV2, and yet the sequencing is just curious. Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, which she chose to use the album version, and that in and of itself is kind of confusing because I would have thought she would have used the Miami mix, which was the reason it charted. That Miami mix is awesome, and it would have also fit better into the sound of the album. And that really addresses one of the issues too, is that the in the 90s, Madonna became a bit more experimental in her sound, so you have a lot of disparate sounding songs. Erotica was very unpolished. It had a very rough sound to it. And then you have Secret, which was our Secret Bedtime Story, very R&B and Babyface kind of influence, that New Jack kind of R&B sound going on there. And then you have Evita, which is totally musical and very different from the rest. And then you top it all off with two very electronic albums. And even between Ray of Light and Music, those two albums, they're very different. Between William Orbit's sound and Mirwaz's. So you kind of, it would have been nice if she would have hired someone to kind of come in there and do some remixing and polishing and editing to kind of make it all sound cohesive. She didn't bother doing that. And then she chose really bad versions. I mean, the Human Nature version she chose is the butchered edited version. So it's the chorus, it alters the chorus completely. It's just a repeat of the one line. I'm not sorry, it's human nature. She says it like twice in a row. The reason people want to listen to that song is they want to hear Madonna say, "I'm not your bitch, don't hang your shit on me." She neutered the song, and it didn't have the same oomph. It might as well have not been on there. And quite frankly, I don't think that version should have even been on there anyway. I think If you owned the maxi single to Human Nature, you recall the very first track was called Radio Edit, but it was very fast and dancey and had some piano in it, and that was Danny Tenaglia's work, and that Radio Edit, in my opinion, should have been included. The album needed some faster dance tracks, and that would have been great. I also think with all the Erotica songs she included, she should have used the radio edits, because the radio edits were, or remixed radio edits, because those were polished. On Deeper and Deeper, which was the opening track, David Morales did a fantastic club mix, club with a K, and that remix could easily have been edited to like a 4.5 minute track and been included. That would have been fantastic. Another thing that really burns my toast about GHV2, which apparently is the album I'm actually reviewing here, is that because of the existence of the ballad collection, Madonna decided it was redundant to include tracks from that album. That's really frustrating because you end up having chart-topping songs. You have This Used to Be My Playground. That definitely went to #1, excluded. And then you have I'll Remember. I think that was a top 5 hit, excluded. Really good song too, deserved to be there. That just really bothered me, that because at the end of the day, this is supposed to sum up this period of time for you, and you shouldn't be taking into account a previous compilation. That's just not how you do it. And so, but that's how she chose to do it. So we don't get any Rain, and we don't get any I'll Remember or This Used to Be My Playground, which is a bummer. And I'm just going to segue into Celebration, which was the 2009 double disc compilation that is career spanning. That one was better than GHV2 because at the very least she added some new tracks. You know, that was the other thing with her second compilation, is she didn't bother recording any new music. I shouldn't even say that. She actually did. There were a couple tracks she recorded for it, and then at the end of the day, she decided not to put them on there. Thanks a lot. There's no new material on here, and you didn't mix any of the tracks you did put on there, and you put them in a really crappy order, so you can't even listen to it through. It's just... And it's reflected in how the album performed, too. Immaculate Collection spent 142 weeks on the charts. GHV2 spent 18 weeks on the charts. I just think Madonna just kind of... I think it was almost like obligatory that she put it out there. I think the record label wanted her to, and she could have cared less. And I think that's really unfair, because her catalog from that time period, from Erotica through to Music, is probably her best works. So to be so indifferent to it is really offensive to me. And I guess going back to the Immaculate Collection, there's a lot of tracks on here that I wish were on here. I really wish Keep It Together had made it, Causing a Commotion, Dress You Up, Angel, and The Look of Love. Believe it or not, I really love that song. I get why that's not on there. It really was not a hit. But despite those things, but despite that, this is a perfect album. It's just done so well, and I don't know if that's because she put more thought into it. Actually, quite honestly, I think with each of her greatest hits, you can tell that she's not a big fan of doing them. But at least with this one, I think with this one, her attitude was, if I have to do a greatest hits, I at least want it to sound new. And I think that's why she went with Chef Pettibone to remix a lot of it and do that Q sound. I think that was where she was going with it. So yeah, this became a lot more than just a review of Immaculate Collection. But just to wrap it up, every track is a favorite for me on here. The 2 new songs, Rescue Me is my favorite. The mix of Like a Prayer is fantastic. It was better than the version on the Like a Prayer album. Same thing with Express Yourself. They improved it. It was the case with almost every track. They improved it. So kudos to them. Uh, yeah, this album works great as an introduction to Madonna. Although, who fucking needs an introduction to Madonna? She's everywhere. But if you do live under a rock, um, at the bottom of the ocean on a different planet, I would recommend this as a gateway into her music. And I would also recommend that you never buy GHV2. Sounds like a disease an animal gets, like an avian influenza. God, she needs to redo that. Do you agree? I think she owes it to her music from that time period to do that music justice and have a proper compilation that can be listened to as its own piece, like she did with this. Because when you make a greatest hits album as good as that one, you can't follow it up with the garbage she followed it up with. Listen to me. Listen to how harsh I am. Well, this has been Jesse and my review of Immaculate Collection / all of her greatest hits albums. Done. So just want to say that please, if you like my video, give me a thumbs up. And if you have anything to say, please leave me a comment. And I'm going to start trying to put out videos more often, hopefully like every other week or maybe even more. I'm going to start reviewing all her other albums. And hopefully on those ones I will stick to talking about the subject and not meandering. It's very difficult for me to do. I might need to see someone who can coach me.